a warm welcome to our panellists who will be shortly duly introduced. I just really want to start off by acknowledging all of you for the amazing work you are doing in support of catchment groups, in working as part of catchment groups and doing the mahi, and the incredible range and variety and creativity that we've seen and experienced and got excited about over the last couple of days with the sharing of what's going on. It's been truly inspiring, and I know it's going to continue to be inspiring tonight and into tomorrow. And as a big theme of this gathering has been around supporting others through building skills, sharing knowledge and confidence so that they too in turn can support others and engage with others. I thought this whakatauki would be a nice way to open our evening. Mā te huruhuru, harere te manu. And the understanding I have of that, and there may be others, is that it is adorn the bird with feathers so that it may fly. And I understand that's from Tama Te Rangi, so thank you, Tama Te Rangi, for a beautiful whakatauki. So, to start us all off, we're just going to give the chance to introduce themselves. And before I do that, I'd like all of you to introduce yourselves to the panellists. So we're just going to start to show the range of where we are from. So I'd just like to ask those of you who hail from north of Auckland or Auckland, please raise your hands. Okay. Whoa, who's the furthest north? Who's the very furthest north? Te Ma'u. And whereabouts Te Ma'u? Whereabouts?
I'm at the tail of the fish.
Right up the very top. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you, Te Ma'u. Okay, so coming back down, and now we're between Auckland and Wellington. Who is in that general direction? In the middle, not on the poles. Okay. Anybody here from Wellington? Yep, quite a few. And how about Waikato or other places? And Taranaki. Okay, right. Our west pole. What about our eastern pole? Oh, excellent. Yeah. Woohoo! Okay. All right. And then coming down to the beautiful Te Waipounamu, where we are now. Who's top of the south? Okay. Great. And how far out to the west are we? Anybody? How far out? Beyond Golden Bay? Anybody? Oh. Tasman? Marlborough? Great. Okay. West Coast? And Southland? Yep. And Canterbury. There's quite a lot. Woohoo! Okay. Fantastic. Now, super quick now. Who's involved or has been involved in a wetland project as part of Waiconnection? Hands up. Great. How about a white bait project? How about a teaching others how to do monitoring project? Okay. How about a catchment restoration planning project? Okay. How about a getting revegetation along creeks, streams and hillsides? Wow. EDNA? Okay, so just a little sense of the depth and breadth of the amazing projects that this crew have been doing. So thank you so much, everybody, for our little speed introduction. Now, we've got a bit of a game to start off with for our panellists this evening. And it is going to be about this. Looking, everybody, how do you like your why? Okay, how do you like your why? And we have some props for our panellists, and we're going to bring them out. Okay, now they can have a little fight over these things. So listening up, those who like to be beside the why can claim the deck chair. Okay, they can claim the deck chair. Those who like to be in it can claim this incy-wincy little bikini, and I'm quite happy for them to try it on if they wish. Perhaps on top of the clothes rather than underneath. Okay. All right. Those of you who like to take your Y by going underneath it, there is a very attractive-looking snorkeling mask that you could adorn yourselves with. And then if you are one of those people who wants to be on top of the Y, there is a surfboard, and unfortunately A light-fingered person stole our real surfboard this evening, so we've just got to borrow the paper one. Okay, so when I say ready, steady, go, please grab which one it is. If both of you go to one, it's okay to share, but we do want you to introduce yourself in this way. Firstly, your name. Secondly, where you are from. And thirdly, your favourite piece of water. And then just a short sentence as to why you have chosen why you like your why. Got it? Name, where from, favourite water, and your reason for choosing how you like your why. Okay, I'm going to start from Grant, and then we'll move this way.
Do I have to pick up one of these first, do I?
You do have to pick up one of those first.
Okay.
And preferably
Righto.
model it.
Okay. No, I'm not going to put this on. That's the sort of thing that gets politicians in trouble. That you can guarantee it'll go viral, and I'll be give a call from the 9th floor saying, "What the hell were you doing?" So thank you. No, my favourite piece of water is, well, Northland's full of great pieces of water, but my favourite piece is actually sitting in Kororako or Russell in the bay there. It's just a beautiful spot, particularly in summer, and it's somewhere that I really love to be. And I love swimming in the water, and particularly in the summer. Not so much in the winter. I let that to mad people who go surfing with 7mm wetsuits. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, right, let's hear from you, Janine. Yeah.
Mine would be the chair sitting beside the water. I'm from Lincoln, far from here, about an hour from here. My favourite piece of water is Tiwahora, Lake Ellesmere. I grew up there, passed by there as a child, went floundering, still enjoy the bird life. We've had an amazing catchment group project actually out by Tiwahora, so that's my favourite place.
Ora. Christina.
More appropriate, please.
Yeah.
I'm going to follow the minister and not put it on. Always take the lead from the government. Kia ora, Christina, Robb. I am from Christchurch. My favourite bit of water is actually just over the hill. So as children, we spent all our summers in the Akuti Valley, which is, you drive through the river, but it's the next one over, and we just were in the stream the whole time, hence the bikini, moving rocks around, swimming, and just spending time in the water.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And how about you, Ellie?
Kia ora, everybody. This is an easy one for me. I am definitely in the water. Do I put it on? I'm not putting it on. Maybe later. I'm from Northland, so I call Te Tai Tokoro home. Resonates with Grant there. I actually live in Ototahi, so I think that's why I got stitched up here a little bit by some of my colleagues, but happy to be here all the same. What was the other question, sorry?
Where you've said where you're from, your favourite water?
So my favourite piece of water is the Tutakaka coast up in Northland. So, and probably more in particular, a little bay before you get to Tutakaka called Nungaru. And I spent a lot of my days swimming in that moana. So thank you.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. So let's just have a bit of a vote now and see which of these favourite ways of taking the water is the winner. So now Grant and Christina both favoured being in the water, wearing suitable attire. Who else in the room favours being in the water, swimming? Okay, can I have somebody from the Y Connection team do the count, please? Just a rough count. Keep your hand up. We've got 14. 1-4. Okay, hold that number, Teresa. Teresa's in charge of numbers. Okie dokie. Now, how about the sitting beside? 1. Okay. 3. Okay. 3. All right. And then we had our person who likes to be under the water. Yeah. So what's... 18, okay. Sorry, the clear winner was under, followed by in, and then, oh, we didn't, and then the sitting beside was 3. Yes, yeah. And right, we haven't voted on this because none of the panelists voted on the top. Anybody in the room prefers being on the top? Yep, but still not quite the winner. Okay, fantastic. All right. So, panelists, just so you know, this is continuing a theme. Yesterday, a very large number of us went out in a southerly gale and snorkeled off Onuku Marae. Yeah. So. Okay. Rightio. Crazy things you end up having to make work or not make work. So, yeah. Okay, so I just really want to set the scene for the panel tonight. And as you know, what our theme tonight is around catchment groups, what's next? And our panellists have been asked to prepare a 5-minute presentation to some questions. And after that, we will have a chance to ask them a question or two. And thank you to all of you who sent those questions through. It's very helpful. And then at the end, once we've heard from each panellist, there'll be a chance to ask some further. Can you get that to shut up? There's no one in your context called embarrassing.
You said no problem, I won't.
Okay. How she even turned on, I've got no idea, but we won't go there. Right. Thank you very much for that. Oh dear. So, what was that, Teresa? Yeah. Yeah, I've got some timing here. Yeah. So thanks very much. Okay, so where I was at before Siri rudely interrupted me. So at the end there'll be another couple of questions, and they've been sent in, so thank you very much. And then if we run out of those, we will open to the floor. So my request is that if we do open to the floor, that you ask your question actually as a question. We would prefer questions and not statements, and keep it pithy and to the point, and try and be on something that the group can actually answer, so that we can have a constructive discussion. Okay, so we're all here about debating ideas, not debating people. So just if you could all adhere to that and keep that in mind, and if we could mutually respect each other, I'm sure we can have a really fun, great night. Is that okay with everybody? Everybody's okay with that? There's a little bit of a protocol. Yep. Great. Thank you very much. All right. So to start off with, Y Connection was a program that the Ministry for the Environment actually courted Mountains to Sea Conservation Trust to take on. And they did this because Mountains to Sea Conservation Trust had proven over a period of 20 years that they were extremely effective at engaging in a fun, informative and very educational way with a broad range of people in the communities. And they had a really amazing track record in experiencing marine reserves, in whitebait connection, and in community-based freshwater monitoring. And this was seen to fill a real gap, because while there was some really great stuff going on in the catchment space, there were lots of gaps, and there was a lot of silos going on, and a lot of situations where only certain parts of a catchment were being involved. And so out of that, the Y Connection project was born. and kicked off in, was it May 2023? I think we finally got things started off. And since then has managed to make a huge difference right through the country. I think at last count, just under 400 catchment groups have been involved with Y Connection, which I think was about 200% over the KPI that had been agreed. With 300%, yeah. Thank you. He's the comms guy. Yeah, Conrad, just chuck more facts in as I need them. Okay, 293% exactly. Thank you very much. And you can see that in my excitement with Siri, the one page that she's hidden from me was the fact page that I was hoping to quote off. On top of that, a very large number of people have been involved and trained. I think it was 900 people have been taken part in capacity building training. Am I correct? You two with facts. And on top of that, tens of thousands of people have been involved in Y Connection activities and benefited from the skill building and the knowledge sharing that has come from those things. So to continue with Y Connection will come at some cost, and there's a very real need to know if and how that could be funded. And I guess the thing for us, I think, to all keep in mind tonight is this is a program that has really shown an enormous return for each dollar spent. And there's a whole lot of evidence in writing that shows that. And so I think that one of the things that everybody here will be very keen to hear from is your ideas and knowledge and thinking about how could we actually see that be supported into the future as an important way of really helping continue that capacity building, that capability building, which of course then turns into real amazing change on the ground for communities, families, local businesses, catchments, the environment, and the primary industry. So, with no further ado, I'm going to now hand to our panellists and give them their 5 minutes each. I will be putting the timer on, and at 1 minute I'll show you a little sticky note, and then at time I'll show you another little sticky note. Okay, is that all right, everybody? And so I will now start with, I think I was starting in alphabetical order, which meant I was starting with you, Ellie. Okay, yep. And just what I will do before Ellie starts is I'm actually going to introduce her because, of course, that's what I must do. So Ellie McHugh is the manager of the MFE System Tools team, and that includes, yes? Oh, you're not hearing me. Sorry, apologies. Okay. Ellie McHugh is the manager of the MFE System Tools team, and that includes the people working on the freshwater farm planning policy. She has a background with organisations including Fonterra, Northland Regional Council and Watercare, and she brings extensive experience in environmental management and policy. Her team at MFE are looking to create impactful system interventions grounded in real-world applications, including freshwater farm plans and a risk index tool, and they really hope to see that drive sustainable and resilient outcomes. So a very warm welcome, Ellie, and thank you for your hard work in this area over the years.
Thank you very much. It's so nice to be here. I had a bit of an introduction plan, but the team have done such a great job at getting us to feel comfortable up here and introducing us. So I won't go into everything. You know that I come from Northland. I'm very passionate about water. If I'm not on top of it, I'm in it, I'm under it. Normally takes me about 30 minutes when I land up in Northland to be in the water. So that's why I'm here. One thing that I had built into my pepeha recently was a bit of an acknowledgement, and it's just a very short statement that I wanted to open with, which was e mihi anaki ngā wai whakatere taniwha. So it's just an acknowledgement of the waters, and I think it's just a nice way to start off. I do come from Northland. There's probably actually a couple of things I should also tell you before I start. One is I have a little bit of a lazy eye, so if you're asking me questions and you're looking at me, I promise maybe I'll point to you. Secondly, I am recovering from a mild concussion. So we're off to a really good start here, team, but I do sometimes forget my way. So I feel like you've all been stitched up here as much as I have. And the other thing is I'm an oversharer. Probably also picked that up as well. So, all right. As stated, I am from Northland. I spent a lot of time going backwards and forwards to Northland, moving in and around. I do live now here in Christchurch or Tatahi, and that's where I've picked up the MFE work. Prior to that, I was working for Northland Regional Council, and that's where I got introduced to catchment groups and the work that you all do. I myself actually was in the compliance monitoring team, so quite a different realm for the areas that you work in. What I saw was my colleagues working across the hallway and land management, really getting on the ground, and a lot of collaboration and things working really well for them. What I saw on our side was just it was really hard to deal with when you're so passionate about the environment. Is every day going in and seeing people do really bad things, and not really having great tools to be able to make things better. So spent a long time sort of looking at that. I think it was about 5 years in that role, walking in every day, hoping for things to start looking better, and every day kind of walking home and going, God, I don't know if this is the life for me. Was able to get involved in some really cool things up in Northland, including some drought response protocols and some cyanobacteria response protocols. Again, I kind of felt like a little bit of the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, looking at stuff after it happened and not being in a position to front foot any of that. And that after time got to me a little bit, and I thought, yeah, maybe it's time for me to try something else. So I left Fair Northland, travelled south, started working for Fonterra. Really enjoyed my time there. It was 2.5 years also of quite a hard slog, not feeling like I was in a position to make any change. And then also seeing a whole lot of things going on in local and central government in terms of reform coming, and managed to have a chat with a colleague who said to me, when are you coming back? Like, maybe Fonterra is not where you needed to be, and you should consider a role maybe in freshwater farm plans. And I sort of went, oh yeah, that's a nice idea, and laughed it off and walked off. But that idea grew on me, and then saw an opportunity, and I thought, oh yeah, I could do that, but I wanted to know if it was the right role for me. So I decided to go around and talk to people in councils about freshwater farm plans. I wanted to get the vibe for, what people thought about it, whether there was a willingness, whether this was going to be the thing. Spoke to a lot in the farming community. I've got a lot of friends from my time in the Waikato many years ago. And they were all very excited about farm plans coming in. Obviously a little bit nervous, but everybody was on board, and I thought, yep, this is the time, this is the place that I want to be. So came in, and we had a very interesting time, because about 3 months after I came in, we sort of got a signal that farm plans was going to be paused. So we spent a lot of time working through farm plans, pause, policy, and then it's given us a lot of time to think about implementation. And implementation for us is the part that we really like. It's the part that my team loves. It's been very interesting space, taking 10 people out of an implementation, working on the ground to a policy scene, and thankfully they've taken the task on. And I think it's worked really well, because they have seen this program right through. They've been the ones out there talking to everybody all the way along, so they know what the challenges are out there. They know what good looks like, and they've been super passionate. I've never worked for such a passionate team. And we really, we've been looking around, how do we implement? We're a team of 10 now. I've got my 1 minute, thank you. And it's a small team. And we're going to need people to help us implement them to get some of these really cool environmental outcomes that we're seeking. So for us looking to catchment groups, how we can work in together, how we can, use the willingness and the passion that that catchment groups have to put some of our thinking in place. So I haven't really answered any of those questions, but I feel like I've talked around it enough. I'm happy to answer questions, obviously. You can bring me back to order.
Thank you very much for that, Ellie. And we do have one question for you here, which is, what do you see as the potential role of catchment groups in freshwater farm planning?
We have talked a lot about how we can use catchment groups. I think the knowledge that catchment groups have about their catchments is going to be absolutely critical for us to get all of the buy-in that we need for farmers. They're going to want to work with people that they know and trust, and we think that those people that they know and trust sit in the communities that they reside in. So that's our thinking.
Thank you very much. All right. And I guess the next question related to that is, how do you see that freshwater farm planning could actually meaningfully build on the information and knowledge that each catchment group has gathered and incorporate it into farm plans rather than having consulted do it all over again?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We, like when we talk about as a team how we're who's gonna make these farm plans, right? And we know there's going to be consultants out there that are going to come. People need consultants as well, right? When they're unsure of where to start. What we're hoping is that people will start to look to a wide range of people to gather the information for their plans. So, leaning on the expertise that exists in their communities already to help them put together what are the risks that affect the whole catchment. So we've still got catchment context in there, and we're still going to be relying on that way for people to build their plans. And build is a really good word, I think, here, is build their plans. Not everybody needs to get it perfect the first time round. What they need to do is just make a start on those plans, and they can build from there and build the knowledge as more information comes to light, as people gather more data. Yeah, build that in as we go.
Thank you very much. Okay, right, so we're now moving along here. Now the next letter in the alphabet is Christina. And you, so Christina is here from Te Uru Kahika. She has a long interest in water management and community collaboration and enabling community-led solutions in this water space. In recent years, her work has involved providing advice to councils, government, farming organisations and mana whenua. One of her roles is working for Te Uru Kahika, the collective of regional and unitary councils, as their freshwater director. And she's supporting learning between councils on freshwater issues and advocacy on behalf of them with central government. She was a member of the Cawthron-led project, of a Cawthron-led project under the Our Land and Water Science Challenge, which explored the role and potential of catchment groups. Christina is a person of enormous knowledge and experience. She and I go back at least, it's well in excess of a couple of decades. And so it's great that you could join us for tonight, Christina. And over to you.
Kia ora tātou. Thanks, everybody. And I didn't write the bit about enormous experience. That was added on. I wanted to just share some reflections from my research work on catchment groups, and also how the regional councils think about catchment groups, because I've been doing quite a bit of talking to them about that at the moment. But just wanted to say that I just acknowledge Mountains to Sea and all the work that's gone on and all the momentum that's been created, because in my mind, and for a long time, that's where you get real change, is when you get a really empowered community. So it's really good to see you here, and the years of work that I know have gone on coming to fruition but not finishing, hopefully. So one of my things I think is that the impetus for catchment groups and the momentum must come from the community. When we started with Cawthron research, we thought we'd be able to define who needed to be in a catchment group, how they were set up. Do they need to be formally constituted? Do they need to employ a facilitator? All those kind of things. And my current thing is now, if you really believe they come from the community, and that's where the emphasis comes from, do not define them. Do not define them. You don't need to constrain the passion and the action that you see. So moved away from that they were a thing that you could define. I see an awful lot of synergies and complementarities between the work that councils do and the work that catchment groups do. I mean, lots of people paint councils, regional councils, as regulators. That is one of their roles, but it's about a third of their capability and capacity. They have a lot of science and monitoring expertise. They have also an awful lot of expertise, as Ali was talking about, in the advice on erosion, fish passage, wetland restoration. There's a large workforce that is involved in providing advice to people at the property level through to the catchment level. And I see lots of, across the country, I've just done all these interviews, lots of synergies between catchment groups and councils, which I think is great. If you look at what a council does in freshwater and biodiversity, one of the things they're charged with doing is setting outcomes. If you look at what a lot of catchment groups are doing, they're doing the same thing, maybe at different scales, and that's okay. So really where these things start to, in my mind, really take off and get a lot of support is where catchment groups work on their outcomes, because they're for their purposes. The council works on its outcomes, taking into account a range of views, including mana whenua, and any interests, including people that don't live in the catchment, recreationists, everybody. And then you have two sets of outcomes. And what we need to do is concentrate on the overlap, because there will always be a lot of it. So being clear about what you're trying to achieve is a message I give to councils quite often, but it also something that catchment groups do. And then let's talk about the commonalities. I've done a survey recently across all the regional councils to see what they're funding to, not just to groups, but what they give out through their biodiversity incentive funds, their grant funds, their projects they fund directly. And across the 16 regional councils, it's about $48 million a year, which isn't huge money, but it is some money. So councils are actually putting their own money into making some of these things happen, and in lots of cases doing that with catchment groups. So I think that's a really good thing. Funding comes with a few fishhooks, sometimes in terms of reporting and some requirements and things you might have to meet. From a council perspective, it's public money, and so there are some accountabilities, and I don't think anyone should be worried about that, or council should have to apologise for that when it's other people's money. So, oh, good. I got one other thing I wanted to say. I think councils work at a certain scale and catchment groups work at a scale that's often a bit smaller, and I have this vision of data, monitoring, funding, outcomes, all sort of being nested so that you've got different people working at different scales, but they're on lined up things. And the other thing I'd like us to it's a challenge really. It's a challenge that councils find. It's really hard when you try and say what needs to happen in a catchment and you map it. And so there's a real thing around privacy of information and all those things that actually make some of this stuff quite hard to progress. So I wonder whether catchment groups are a safer environment for some of progressing some of those things.
That was perfect. Thank you, Christina. So you answered quite well the question, which was around that someone had asked around the role you saw for regional councils with catchment groups, and you talked about the nesting of roles and understanding they operate at separate, different levels. So I'm wondering, just with your expertise in working with mana whenua, perhaps this would be a good question to put to you. How do you see, and what would you see as the best way to
help ensure that ongoingly Mātauranga Māori and iwi partnerships are reflected in catchment initiatives, and if you like, talk also about the regional council context, just where you may have some pearls of wisdom to share with us on that.
My advice is go and visit the marae, like make the connections very locally. I haven't seen anything other than that work. You do need to find out local hapu and iwi may not have the same priorities as you, but there are some amazing examples, and I'm sure you've had some in the room today where the initiatives are led actually by mana whenua. So there's nothing that replaces relationships. And look, councils are the same, where they've spent the time on investing in a relationship, things work. Where they haven't, it's hard work.
Great, so relationships are the key there. Yep. Thank you very much. Okay. And then I guess the next question from your perspective is having watched and seen this evolution with catchment groups, what do you see perhaps as, if you were going to think about a wicked problem that catchment groups needed to solve to do with their own longevity, what would it be, and are there any pearls you would offer that wicked problem of ensuring longevity? Given that, of course, to change things in a catchment context, we're often talking about hundreds of years.
The world according to me. The world according to me. So something we looked at a lot in the Cawthron research was about succession and the value of having youth involved and those kind of things. When it comes to longevity of funding, I'm not sure if that's a narrow way to define it, but it obviously matters a lot to people. I think funding affects the rate at which you can do stuff, but actually if you have an action plan and things you want to do, then the funding can be fed into that, if that makes sense. Longevity is a really curly one at the moment for everybody, but you've got to think about the longevity of your members of your group, which is succession, and then all of us collectively, probably just more than the catchment group community, think about the longevity of funding this kind of activity.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And we're now moving on to our next presenter, who is Janine. And it was okay. You can, Grant, we'll go to you. Sorry. Mine got out of order. Yeah. My apologies. I clearly am not going to pass that NCA level in my literacy. So apologies, Grant. So just an introduction to Grant now. Grant is the MP for Northland, is a farmer and long-time advocate for the agricultural sector. He's held leadership roles in federated farmers, along with sports and education bodies in his own local community. He was elected in 2023 and is currently the Deputy Chairperson for the Environment Select Committee and a member of Parliament's Education and Workforce Committee. He also is the Deputy Chair for the Transport and Infrastructure Committee and the Chair of the National Party's Blue-Greens Parliamentary Caucus. So thank you, Grant, for all this years of service and being part of the amazing Blue-Greens with the distinguished alumni in them like Simon Upton. So yes, so looking forward to hearing your panel presentation.
No, anyway, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, look, it's great to be here. I think the question is what next for catchment groups? Well, I think the first thing I better deal with, the elephant in the room that I'm sure everyone's wondering about, is the funding aspect. Whilst I can't give any specifics, what I can say is when I talked to the Minister, Penny Simmons, at the end of the break, that she will be making an announcement before the budget. The budget's on the 22nd of May, and she will make an announcement as to what her plans are going forward. So you'll know when I know, and we'll all be able to work it out from there, okay? But what I will say is that we certainly, as a government see the value in catchment groups. They will play, I think, a very, very important part in our environmental challenges and water quality improvements going forward. The way they've evolved and communities have embraced them, both rural and urban, and the connection that's brought between those two communities is quite staggering, to be honest. What it has allowed is both to actually understand each other's challenges. I think that's been something that at times has frustrated those in the rural community who think, all we do is get complained about. People don't understand what we're doing. And then on the flip side, then you look at somewhere, and probably the best example of this, when it suddenly came home to people in more urban communities, that actually everyone's got a part to play, was one summer many years ago when the Herald, bless them, on the front page of the paper listed all the beaches that were safe to swim. And quite a few of them weren't. And I think that then showed that actually this is both an urban and a rural challenge, and we've all got to sit down and address it, and it will take time and it will take money. And so we've got to keep all that realism in the picture. And so where I see catchment groups playing a really important part is that it brings everyone together. And also it allows people to find solutions. Some of the solutions people come up with are just amazing. And New Zealanders are very innovative and realistic. They can do things on the smell of an oily rag. It's just the nature of it. Sometimes it's because you have to. People love getting involved in good community stuff and seeing results. This is the difference. The challenge with, say, climate change policy is it's hard to see the results. But when you look at doing catchment work, you can actually see results. And, whether it's things planted, whether it's water quality improvement, and that sort of thing. And that's the real advantage that catchment groups will have going forward. And one thing, and it's been summed up, it's been emphasised by the fact that this last year I hosted in Parliament the fledgling group called Aotearoa New Zealand Catchment Communities. And you've got mountains to the sea as well. And so the fact that you've got groups of that size and strength wanting to get together, and that's one thing I do really encourage is that those two organisations to sit down, I know they are, and work out how they're going to work together, because one thing governments don't like is multiple organisations coming and asking for the same money for the same pie. If you can actually work it out, so we can then have good systems of divulging money to good results and be accountable, that makes life a lot easier for any government. So that's I'm really looking forward to working with the organisations going forward. So ultimately, going forward, I think catchment groups will play, I think, a fundamental part in actually helping us solve and meet the challenges of our environmental challenges going forward. And I thank you all for the work you've done and you will continue to do. And you'll do it not because we make you, but because you love it. And speaking as a farmer, because that's what I've done most of my life, is nothing farmers like more than doing stuff on their land. And you just got to get the point in the right direction. As the point was made today by whoever, Janine, I think it was, said, her husband just said, well, what do you want me to do? And he just go and do it. Farmers love doing stuff. So just always remember that if you're engaging with them. So thank you.
Great job on the timing there again, Grant. So the question I have here, which came through our questions, was, and you can answer this as a farmer, what benefits do you see from being part of a catchment group for farmers from a financial point of view? And I'd probably encourage you to answer that quite widely. I know myself have recently been engaged with a catchment group who are really trying to grapple with the whole area of land use change after having spent 5 years doing the more straightforward things. So I just encourage you to answer that as broadly and perhaps strategically as possible.
Yeah, very big picture, because that's ultimately the major benefit. Is one of the things we're learning as a country is that when we go into the global marketplace, let's put aside all the Trump tariff disasters going on, but the general when we go out to sell our products to the world, the story we can tell is really important. It helps differentiate us. People, particularly because we've got these phones, they like more and more to know the story behind their product they're consuming, whether it's food or clothing, for example. And so if we can actually add into that, the value of catchment groups will add to that value, I think, substantially, because people love seeing the sorts of things we saw today. That adds real value. It's that warm, fuzzy feeling of knowing that the milk I'm drinking or the meat I'm eating is coming from an area, from land use that's been well looked after and well maintained. And that's where I think the big value will come from the likes of catchment groups.
Thank you very much. Another one here. What innovations or technologies does the government plan to support to enhance catchment monitoring and management capabilities?
That's a great question. I have got no idea. But what I would say is this. And I do have a little bit of, I suppose, insight. Up in Northland, we've got a catchment group, probably the Rolls Royce of catchment groups, called the Kahika Remediation. They're getting funded to the tune of $10 million a year for 10 years, which is a heck of a lot of money. That all came out of a bit of a treaty deal, and it's all about trying to improve the environment of the Kahika harbour, the Kahika catchment, which is a massive catchment, right? And so I know that they've spent quite a bit of time on creating decent data analysis tools and analysis tools. So that's the sort of thing that I'd like to think will come out and make everyone's job easier, so we can share information and ideas, so we don't all repeat the same things that haven't worked somewhere else, okay?
Great, thank you very much. And I think we all saw some interesting innovations today too, didn't we, shared? And some were revitalisations of traditional practices too. Thanks very much for that, Grant. Well, it's a great pleasure now to introduce Janine Alfeld from MPI. I think Janine and I go back a good 20 or 30 years as well to Agriculture New Zealand days. Janine's been working for MPI and its predecessor MAF for more than 17 years. She's held many roles during that time. For the past 5, she has been involved in funding catchment groups, and she's currently the National Manager Catchment Programs and oversees the management of contracts to 230 catchment collectives and groups throughout New Zealand. Janine's from a 4th generation farming family and lives in Lincoln. So very warm welcome, Janine, and thank you again for your enormous contribution to agriculture and sustainable agriculture over the decades.
Okay, thank you, and thanks everybody for having me here. So I've got some answers to questions. I should have gone before Grant because he took a lot of my sentiments. But what next for catchment groups? So as introduction, 5 years working with catchment groups. About 5 years ago, government announced a special package funding catchment groups, and wow, we've come a long way in 5 years, a huge, huge way. So yes, we're funding over 230 catchment groups. Now, catchment groups are all very different, and we've learnt that along the way. No one size fits all, and it's got to be driven from the ground. It's got to be grassroots driven and looking for solutions for your region or your area in which you're in. It doesn't work top down. It doesn't work unless there's community buy-in and people really standing up and leading the way and bringing people along on the journey. I think a lot of catchment groups, there's so much in kind given and so much donation of time that's really overlooked by people. It's just bringing the whole cohesiveness of community together, and they come along for the purpose of one thing, but quite often that morphs into something else. They're solutions driven. I've noticed in the time of adverse events, it's the community and catchment groups that bring everyone together. It's them that are checking on their neighbours, running around with generators, and it's just the whole buy-in of everyone working together. A lot of the community catchment group work brings along schools, brings along, we've got a catchment group not far from here that have the local retirement home building traps for pest trapping, but they still want to give back to their community, and that's a great way of bringing urban and rural together. The other questions I've got here. The sort of things that I've learned, I've said those, some of the things, but I think the momentum for catchment groups is definitely built and has gone up on the trajectory. It's how do we keep that going? I know Ben's here from ANZCC. We've funded not only catchment groups, but we've funded New Zealand Linkhead Trust, which is another amazing organisation that helps catchment groups throughout New Zealand. And we've also funded Quorum Sense, which is a regenerative agriculture group that, no, it's not a catchment group, but it is a group of farmers that are interested in a common theme in a region or area. And so I don't think that sometimes you have to be in a catchment, you can be in a sub-catchment or something. A lot of the time it's around water or around a common problem, and that's what brings people together. And so that's what I've learned over the time. It has to be something that is genuine to people and people that really are interested in it. What was the other questions that we had? The benefits of building and the momentum going forward. Oh, that's right. We've got music now. Get up and do a jig. So it's how we work on the 5 years that have been before us. What do we do? But I think it's working smarter together and working with all the different groups. There are so many different catchment groups now. As we've got over here, 400. We've got MPI and MFE involved in that space, and DOC, with the Jobs for Nature that is coming to an end. We've got Mountains to Sea, we've got ANZCC, we've got NZLT. So how do we work together? And that is starting to happen, like a strategy is looking at getting developed. And we're working on that. How do we work smarter together? And I think that's the key for the longevity of all the catchment groups, because you're all doing an amazing job. So how do we keep you all going? Okay, that's me.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks so much, Janine. And there's a couple of questions here which you may be able to have a go at answering, just building on actually what you started to say. And the first one here is, how will the government integrate local catchment group knowledge and initiatives into national freshwater policy frameworks? And I think we can probably broaden that to sustainable agriculture frameworks. So just wondering if you've got some thinking on that to add.
That's a big question. I think the farmers can come up with how they can implement on the ground, and a lot of the information and what's happening is fed up back up into Wellington, and so catchment groups do have a voice. It is heard and it is being taken back up into Wellington, which I'm sure Grant can adhere to. How we integrate that into
the freshwater policy frameworks.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that is largely our job. We get the feedback from people like you. I mean, this is why it's so important when we do have submission processes on bills that are relevant to our space, or you've got a real issue, go and see your local MP, because that's their job, is to bring that feedback through. And so, for example, when we've had submissions just recently on the latest tranche of RMA reforms, not the main one, which is coming at the end of the year, the feedback, what I found with this, certain bills gets just repetitive, boring, submissions. The feedback we had on this particular bill was very, very good, very constructive and well thought out. And one of the things, for example, the original policy idea was that we would do away with a lot of the consultation processes. I mean, and when you have hearings, a lot of the hearings and on consents, virtually everybody on both sides of the equation wanted to still have hearings. So that's the sort of thing that can happen if you get good constructive feedback that comes in and it's logically presented. So, yep, that's our job, to feed that in, to get the best outcomes. And the other thing that's really important is if we get something wrong, it's important that we know about it, because sometimes you just have to admit you got it wrong and make a change.
Great, thank you. And then I think the next one was, what funding models is government considering to ensure the long-term sustainability of catchment groups? And I think that this is, again, coming back to the reality we all know, that the 3-year cycle does not match with the sort of scale of projects, including things like the share relationship building, that catchment groups require to be successful? What's been explored and what could be possible in that area?
Good question. We are exploring, along with the government, how can we integrate with ANZCC? How can we integrate with other sector bodies, Beef and Lamb, Dairy NZ, because they all invest in catchment groups. CRIs are investing in catchment groups and research, regional councils. It's a busy field, isn't it? How can we all work better? And we are looking at being more strategic and looking at more collectives or larger models, if that's applicable to regions. So everything is on the table at the moment, and this is an exciting time, I think, for change for catchment groups and looking at developing a strategy, how we can all work better together and develop that the next year. And so we'll have a really great model going forward.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you all. And now this comes to the time of a couple of questions we've got for anybody to have a go at, or all of you to have a go at. And so there's just a couple here that I just thought would be useful to start on. This one, which I know is quite live for many groups right now, just judging from what I've seen going around the country and supporting them as a facilitator, and that is what will the government, or how will the government address the volunteer burnout often experienced in community-led catchment groups? So who would like to have a go at answering that? We can have a couple of you. Any of you?
Yeah, it's like any voluntary organisation, isn't it? We've all been parts of different ones. I suppose it's important to have in a leadership in an organisation, is not leave it always up to the same few. You've got to try and rotate and find fresh leadership, because it just brings fresh enthusiasm. But from a government's perspective, and this is I think as the funding comes out, I'd like to think possibly and I'm not in charge of this, but the place where a lot of these groups would need the best advantage of government funding would to make sure that you get you help fund the administration side of it. Because that's the hard part, right? The people that on the ground stuff, the doing stuff, it's the actual having someone to have the knowledge, share the knowledge, to have the professional knowledge and share the knowledge, and or do some of that, do some of that admin. That's where it could make quite a difference. Or that then allow the volunteers to really get stuck in and do the doing. Because I think that's what a lot of people enjoy doing most. It's like going to any organisation. You don't get many hands up for secretary and treasurer. You've got to usually drag it out of someone. So that's sort of been my approach to it. But anyway, we'll see what comes.
Great, thank you. Anybody else like to have a go?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think from a regional council perspective, so I talked before, councils do have some funding, and if they pick a priority project and there's burnout, they have got some skills that can help. There's been a lot of capacity built in councils at the moment, partly because of all the Jobs for Nature money to manage projects, to source trees. So there's a lot of, I'm hoping that councils can come in and help in cases where there's burnout, because there is quite a bit of it. There is a lot of reliance on volunteer labour and volunteer hours, which isn't necessarily the right way to get some of the real high priority stuff done.
Anybody else want to answer?
It was the funding that we provide, we do have for training, and on the catchment groups we do encourage younger people to go on and learn it, use it as a skill and increase their skills that they can use not just on catchment groups but for further employment. So that is part of the funding available.
Great. Okay, so some skill building in that area. All right. Well, I'm now going to open it to the floor for other questions that haven't been answered, because looking back through the list, we've pretty much covered off the ones that came through the email that you all sent in. So who has got a question for one, and just if it is for one of our panellists, please say their name, or if it's for all of them, please say whomever wants to answer. And remembering our rule there, please ask this as a question. Okay, right. I'm going to start with Ben first. And,
Oh, good evening. So you've been into Aotearoa New Zealand Catchment Collective. So my question is probably, maybe Ellie directed to you, but a number of you will be able to comment on it. So you've all described very well how catchment groups are voluntary and grassroots up, and that is the key way they operate, not top down. So just interested with the farm planning work and the interaction that they're going to have, or you've talked about they have with catchment groups, which I think is imperative for catchment context. So how do you see that interaction working? Because it is a difficult space where you interact with a catchment group, yet let them maintain their autonomy and their ground up ethos. Have you any thoughts on that?
That was Ben, right? Yeah, sorry, Ben. I think we were mutually introduced via email, but we haven't managed to touch base yet. So, yeah, we probably need to now. Yeah, I guess up until now, we've been in a little bit of a tight bind in terms of we've been very, we've had to follow the policy line in terms of our engagement and how we set those up. So now we're moving into our implementation focus. And I'm probably not too sure if I kind of got the question right about how you see it working. And
how does a catchment group, which is a bottom-up grassroots organisation, interface with what is going to have a regulatory aspect to it, I imagine?
Yeah, so we have heard loud and clear that we don't want catchment groups to act in that regulatory space. We still think that's the role of the council, and the council still sees that as their role fairly and squarely. So it's trying to find that balance point where catchment groups are supporting the program to set the farm plans up, but not stepping into that space where, you know, they're trying to help the farmers, but then be seen as someone who might then, you know, come along and tell them off, you know, for the things they're doing. You know, there's always going to be a space where maybe people step into an auditing role in another part of their lives, then they may be part of the catchment groups, and that will be something that they'll have to navigate through themselves. But we see two very clear different roles there.
That sounds good, but yeah, we've got some ideas on that too, so good to connect.
Happy to chat, and maybe it's a good way for us to do that. Thanks, Ben.
Okay, next. Else, and then come back to you.
Kia ora koutou, Shelley McMurtry. I'm a principal scientist at Eos Ecology. I'm also trying to unlock my phone, sorry, because I've got my question in here. So I'm working alongside Mountains to Sea in terms of national technical support for the Y Connection project. Christine, I think you said something that really resonated with myself and with everybody in the room here, I imagine, and it was, you said nothing replaces relationships. A lot of what the Y Connection project's done over the last few years has been exactly that. It's been building those relationships, building the trust in the wider community. I suppose I'm just interested, and this can be a personal response from any of you guys up there. It's, what do you see the value in programs like that actually spend the time to build those relationships and the worth of continuing to support those into the future? Because quite often what we see in funding rounds is that you build a program, you develop something, you implement it, and then the next time that the funding comes round, it has to be something new and different, rather than sort of building on the mahi and continuing to sort of build on that, which allows us to, you know, get further down the road and achieve more in the next sort of years of work. I think there was a question in there.
Who would like to have a go at answering that one?
I think I entirely agree with you, but we are maybe a bit guilty in this country of spending a lot of time on building relationships and not actually moving on to action. I think that's probably fair comment. So somehow we've got to get the relationships in place, the trust in place, but we've still got to actually do something. And I feel a little bit like there's a bit of maybe jaded views in some places around whether we actually do start to deliver some stuff. So this comes back to my point about actually starting to tell your stories about what you've done, as well as how you've set yourself up and how you're working together. And, you know, we've just got to get better at getting a real sense of momentum that's actually based on actions. It may take us a while to actually see water quality improvements. So we need to sort of relationships for action, not just relationships for their own sake. I don't kind of know how to word that, but that's my thinking of what I see. So.
Relationships for actions.
Yeah, just look, I think you touched on ultimately, yes, the relationships are really important, but there comes a point where, and because you can only do so much if you're in a catchment, you've got a whole bunch of landowners and interested parties. If you can get 80% of them on board and going, run with it. And if some people aren't doing their part, you do your best, but ultimately that's why you've got to have that stick and that regulator in the end to actually come behind sometimes, just to let those people know, actually, you've got to do it. You've got to get them behind that program and get on with it, because that's how we're going to get the improvement and allow everybody to get on with it. But in terms of, you sort of touched on the funding, and I suppose this is the thing where if you keep working with the funder to let them know what you're doing and how you're progressing, because the funder wants to see progress. They want to see something be coming through for the money, not just like never-ending talk fests, and we've had 50 meetings and this and that. They want to actually see, we've done this, we've built relationships, that's taken us 6 months or whatever, but now we're doing this, this and this, and we started measuring water quality here, and we just got to keep doing it. That's a really important thing. They want to see outcomes, and speaking as a politician, it's always good if it's inside a 3-year cycle. Squad. I'm being a bit facetious.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to continue on that, to answer that? Ellie?
Just literally before you said that, I was thinking in my head is just longer term actions with smaller chunks. Yeah, and that's how you secure that funding.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're going to come back to Conrad. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. Conrad, the comms guy from Mountains to Sea Conservation Trust, who was really anal retentive about numbers about half an hour ago. So my question is, I guess, for all 4 of you individually, given your varying experiences in the sector, if you had $100 million to invest in waterways and wetlands restoration over the next 10 years, and each of you were solely responsible for spending it, you weren't accountable to anyone else, you just got to choose, how would you spend that $100 million? So $20 million a year for the next 5 years, let's say. 10's a long time. Go 5.
How much thinking time do you need before you answer that, folks?
Yeah, that's ultimately like a very short thinking time. You focus. Okay, so we've got a very motivated sector at the moment, and more motivated people wanting to do stuff. The key thing is to make sure, I go back to what I sort of said before, I think the most important thing we can do is make sure the groups get the right support to function, and that they're getting all the information they need. And you've got that connection between across the country, so people don't repeat a mistake that was made over here. I think that you'd fund that side of it, not so much funding all the plants and the fences and stuff, or maybe also you put funding into the actual testing. But the regional councils are supposed to do stuff in that space. But if there's technology, invest in technology to help make it all easier for everybody. Maybe I think that might actually be part of it, that monitoring stuff. Because I think those are the sorts of areas that I would see funding, because the regional councils are the ones that are going to get involved more they'll help subsidise plants and bits and pieces at that level. But I think at a higher level, that's where I go. But I'd also then think, are there any particular hot spots in the country that we really want to get on top of? Because there will be, like once upon a time, Lake Taupo was a real focus for obvious reasons. It's iconic, lake for New Zealand. And so the government stepped in and basically paid out landowners a good chunk of money so they could reduce their nitrogen usages. So there may be that sort of thing you have to think about. Crucial catchments where you might put a bit more emphasis and really help them move it along a bit quicker.
I think catchment point of view would be to collate what information is out there about the water quality, what areas actually need help, where are the gaps, what information do we need to find, what other research do we need to find, and collate that, because we work with so many different organisations, and CRIs or sector bodies are doing research, but it's not shared. It's siloed in individual silos, and there's so much out there that we actually don't know, but someone does know. So it's actually collating all that information together to start with and have a starting point, and then identifying what areas need to be funded or need to be looked at and prioritising, and having a national body and people on it that can actually make decisions instead of talking about it and going round and round in circles, so that we can invest. Be my 2 cents worth.
Right. How much have I got?
You've got $100 million for 5 years.
Okay, so I think the first thing I'd like to see is I would probably have some allocation across the region, so that it wasn't all going to one lake or harbour in the North Island. I'm a South Islander. Then I would like to operate it with quite a high trust model, actually, because I don't think you can do too much picking. You need to, I think it's important that councils, because that's the world I come from and represent here today, need to be very clear about their priorities and the things they would fund. I think catchment groups likewise, and then you back the winners and you try not to tie it up in too much exactly how it's done. It might be technology, it might be facilitation, I don't know, but as long as you've got the outcomes set, then it should operate on a higher trust model than somehow we've been that capable of doing.
Freshwater farm plans? I just want to take it back to that point about long-term action plans, just thinking a little bit longer about some of the things that we're trying to work on, and keeping that funding going for that length of time, so that we all know we're not going to fix fresh water in 5 years' time. We know we're probably not going to fix it in 10 years' time, and I think a large chunk of that money needs to go into data gathering. You don't know what you don't know, and in some catchments, I'm sure we probably could really benefit from gathering more data, understanding exactly what's going on in that, from right upstream down. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one more question. So, Teresa.
I just wanted to ask about, I only joined Mounts to see about 2 months ago. But I did want to ask each panellist of what do you think of the return on investment that you've made in Mountains to Sea, and how fruitful that's been. We've certainly motivated a lot of volunteers across the country. We've been the communicator across the country to get catchment groups together, to get the scientific information in there. And as a not-for-profit, we haven't done it for a profit. We've done it because we've been absolutely passionate for the environment. And that means that we can actually go into areas around New Zealand that other people may not be able to get to, because we can draw on that passion and say, we're not here for a commercial gain. We're here because of our environment and to help you. So what do you think about the return on investment that you've made in us?
Yeah, for me, that's very simple. The return on investment for me is sitting here right in this room. It's the people that are passionate about this, who want to get involved and want to do it. And it's watching communities from the youngest to the oldest, from all walks of life, go out and get involved. That's the return on investment. It brings people together, it creates understanding, and it creates a sense of community. And in a day and age when we all spend far too much time on these things and not enough time necessarily to, out doing things together as a community, I think that's, for me, the return on investment.
I know Mountains to Sea have been involved in the catchment groups, a lot of the catchment groups and ecology mapping and stuff, especially around Canterbury. And so they have been able to add value to the catchment group work and that we've funded. So it's like an added benefit, and definitely the communities and being part of a wider group and having the connections throughout New Zealand that you can bring information to a more local catchment group that might not have that data. So definitely a benefit to us.
I think the real return on investment is going to take quite a while to manifest itself, actually. When I look at some initiatives like the sustainable land use stuff across horizons, it's taken 30 years really for some of that stuff to really show benefits. And, you know, I was up there talking to some farmers and their land didn't move much in Gabrielle because they had it all properly planted. You know, not to say that that would have been the same for everybody, but there are some real long-term benefits that actually might take a while. So we'll probably underestimate the return on investment until the actions really start happening.
How do you wrap that one? So the return on investment, I think I'll probably just talk in a different sense. And you ask people who catchment groups are, what catchment groups are, and you probably, I don't know, maybe 9 times out of 10, they'll say Mountains to Sea or, you know, kaipara moana remediation. So I think that's your return on investment, is people know who you are, what you do, and that you're making a difference. And I think, like you said, it's going to take a long time, but also another return on investment. We're all here because we see the benefit in what you guys are doing, and I think that probably goes a long way to show what we see in it as well.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Everybody's spoken, haven't you?
Yep.
Great. So thanks so much, everyone. We just have one last task, and Jess is going to come around now for each table, and she's got some sticky notes and some pens. And as you'll recall, one of the purposes of the wānanga this week is to identify any new and emerging needs for catchment groups, because that'll inform our planning, which we'll be doing on Thursday afternoon. And so if out of the conversation this evening, or even out today when we were out on the beautiful Awa looking at the dolphins, something came up to you as an emerging need for catchment groups or catchment effort, because we're thinking of groups very broadly, remember, then this is the chance just to jot it down. What I'd ask you to do, just for a bit of fun, is stick it on the bricks up here. We'll gather them up for tomorrow. And then we'll have a record, and we're going to add to those tomorrow as we go through tomorrow's planning and workshopping sessions as well. So anything that's come out of this conversation that starts to you to represent an emerging need for capacity or capability, that's what we'd like you to write down. And then we're just going to have a short break, and then we're going to introduce Grant as our keynote speaker. But I'll just give you 2 minutes just to do that exercise now.
And before we do that, I just thought we should thank the artist, Jackie. She's done a great job. I mean, I'm not sure about my picture, but that's just amazing. Yeah.